The icy silence of the Montana wilderness, something was crying, but it wasn't the wind. Snow fell in hushed sheets, whispering across the pine-covered hills like the breath of something ancient. The world was white, quiet, endless. Somewhere, near Missoula, far from the nearest road or ranch, a single figure trudged through knee-deep drifts, rifle slung over one shoulder. Colt Harrington, 38, didn't come out here for peace. He came because the woods didn't lie. Unlike people, Colt had tracked elk through this terrain for years. It was a place he trusted, a place that didn't ask questions. But on that morning, the air felt different, sharper, charged. Then came the sound, a cry. Not loud, not clear, but unmistakable. It wasn't the yelp of a coyote or the call of a bird. It was fractured. Human maybe, but too ragged. Animal maybe, but too raw. It sounded like pain that had forgotten how to speak. Colt stopped mid-stride, heart slowing, breath fogging the air. He turned his head toward the sound, eyes narrowing beneath his wool cap. The echo bounced back, warped by stone. A cave, his. Boots crunched through frost as he stepped off the trail, drawn not by logic but by something else. Something older. The cry came again, lower now, desperate. Colt's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't a noise meant to be heard. It was a noise meant to be buried. The entrance was almost invisible, a slit in the rock face, blanketed by snow and time. Colt hesitated. Years of hunting had taught him to trust silence, to listen, and this silence was wrong. It wasn't the quiet of peace. It was the quiet that follows screaming. He ducked low and entered. Inside, the air didn't move. It was cold, but not the kind of cold that bites, the kind that waits. His flashlight flickered against the jagged walls as he moved forward, breath echoing louder than his steps. Then, nothing. The cry stopped. "Hello?" he whispered. The cave swallowed his voice, but then, movement, a shift in the darkness. A shape pressed against the wall. A pair of eyes opened, bloodshot, hollow. And in that moment, Colt's world shifted. What lay before him wasn't just a dog. It was a secret, a survivor, a German shepherd, chained and broken, left to vanish. The dark, not by accident. Someone had made sure of that. Colt stepped closer, and that's when the storm outside truly began to howl. Because this wasn't just a rescue, it was a beginning, a reckoning. Part 2.1. The Frozen Prison. The shape didn't move when Colt stepped closer. It didn't growl, didn't bark, didn't even flinch. It just lay there, low to the ground, spine curved against the stone, fur stiff with frost, one eye cracked open in a red, tired stare. It was a German shepherd. At least it had been once. Now it looked like a ghost of one. Hollow, sunken, the flesh around its ribs pulled tight. Blood stained the fur around its hind leg, dark and crusted. The dog wasn't just injured. He was dying. But it wasn't. The wounds that stopped Colt cold. It was the chain. A rusted iron shackle coiled around the dog's midsection and neck, bolted directly into the stone wall behind him. The links were thick, iced over, the kind of chain you'd use to anchor a machine, not a living thing. The skin beneath was raw, some of it missing entirely. The metal had fused with suffering. Colt dropped to one knee, flashlight quivering in. His hand not from fear, but from something deeper. He couldn't name it yet. Grief, maybe. Rage. Both. "Hey," he whispered. No response. He edged closer, trying not to startle the animal, though deep down he knew. There was no startle left in this dog. No flight reflex. Just a distant flicker of breath, shallow and slow. The dog was barely holding on, as if even death had hesitated, unsure whether to take him or leave him to the silence. Colt's hands moved instinctively, examining the chain, the injury, the frostbite setting into the dog's paws. One hind leg was swollen and cracked, the wound deep and unclean. Whoever left him here hadn't simply abandoned him. They'd calculated it. Chosen this cave, This location, this silence. They knew this place swallowed sound. That realization sank into Colt like a stone. Someone had wanted this dog to vanish, not just die, but disappear without trace. He removed his gloves with numb fingers and pressed his palm gently against the dog's chest. Faint, cold thumps. A heart still beating, barely. "You're not alone," Colt muttered, voice catching on the cold. Not anymore. But outside the wind was shifting. The storm thickened, snow now a curtain against the cave mouth. He knew. The terrain. They wouldn't make it far, not with the dog in this state. Carrying him without a sled would be suicide for them both. Still, the thought of leaving him, even for a few hours, felt like betrayal. So Colt made a decision. The kind of decision that doesn't feel brave. It just feels necessary. He peeled off his coat, teeth chattering as the cold bit into his skin, and laid it over the dog. Then he lowered himself beside him, wrapping his arms gently around the frail body, trying to transfer what little heat he had left. He could feel the tremors in the dog's chest. They weren't shivers. They were signs of shutting down. For the first time, the dog blinked, slowly, as if waking from a long, cruel dream. And then, barely audible, he exhaled, a shaky, whispered sigh. Not relief, not trust, just surrender. It broke something in Colt. "You held on this long," he whispered, his forehead brushing against the dog's frozen fur. "So will I." And in that freezing dark, something shifted. Not loudly, not in some cinematic flash of emotion, but quietly, deeply. A connection was forming, built not on touch, not even on sight, but on presence, on not turning away. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the silence pressed in tighter. The dog's breathing slowed even more. Colt pressed his palm to the chest, again, weak, slower. The infected leg pulsed with heat against his own. The shackle around the midsection wouldn't budge. He tried anyway, pulling with stiff hands, fingers bleeding from the cold. But it was embedded deep in the rock, welded shut. They didn't expect anyone to come. Or worse, they didn't want anyone to. The cave mouth was almost closed now, buried under a foot of fresh snow. Colt glanced back at it, knowing every second mattered. But moving too fast would kill the dog. Moving too slow would do the same. He used a torn strap from his hunting pack to wedge between the rock and the chain. Trying to create leverage, the dog winced but didn't resist. Just that same bloodshot eye, watching, waiting. Still no fear, still no fight. Just waiting. Colt wrapped the dog tighter in what remained of his jacket, even tore strips from his own lining to pad the exposed paw. He didn't stop talking. Whispered nonsense. Curses, memories, promises. "Somebody tried to erase you," he said, not sure if he meant the dog or himself. But not today. Time blurred. Cold seeped deeper. Colt checked his watch. Too late to reach the truck. Too dangerous to carry the dog on foot. But waiting until morning would mean the dog wouldn't make it. So Colt carved out a shallow hollow in the corner of the cave, used his pack as insulation, and nestled the dog inside like an ember he refused to let die. He lay down again, chest to back, arm across the frail ribs. "You're not dying here," he whispered into the silence. "Not while I've got a breath left." And just then, the dog moved. Barely. A single paw, lifted with slow effort, rested against Colt's hand. It didn't say thank you, it said don't leave. Morning came slowly, a gray light pressing against the cave walls like a hesitant hand. Colt hadn't slept, couldn't. He spent the night listening. Every breath Ghost took was a fragile reassurance, every pause a jolt of panic. He pressed his fingers to the dog's ribs every few minutes, whispering like a priest repeating a single prayer. "Still with me, still with me." The snow had sealed most of the cave's entrance. Colt knew what that meant. Time was gone. Ghost didn't have another night in him. And if Colt stayed much longer, neither did he. The only option was a gamble. Colt stripped off his last dry layer and wrapped it tight around the dog's limbs. He moved quickly now, with grim resolve. He used what little gear he had left to dig a trench just outside the cave, a shallow, insulated hollow he could shield Ghost in while he ran. It felt wrong. Leaving him even for an hour felt like abandoning a brother on a battlefield, but there was no other choice. "I'll be back," Colt whispered. "Don't you dare give up now." Then he ran. Snow met him like a wall. Each step tore fire through his legs. Each gust sliced across his exposed skin. He slipped, stumbled, cursed. One fall nearly took out his knee. He screamed through clenched teeth and kept going. There wasn't room for pain. There was only forward. A mile and a half through deep powder and dead forest. Colt wasn't sure how he made it. His vision blurred, muscles screamed, but his mind held one image, the dog, barely breathing, waiting. At last, the outline appeared, half sunken in snow, an old hunting shack. Forgotten by most, remembered by Colt. He slammed into the frozen door, forced it open with his shoulder, collapsed inside in a heap of breath and steam. The sled was there, cracked, dust-covered, but intact. He didn't check the ropes. Didn't rest, just grabbed it and ran again, back into the storm, back toward the cave. The return took nearly 2 hours. The trail disappeared behind him almost as fast as he carved it. Colt's legs shook, his lungs burned, his hands were numb, but when he reached the trench and saw movement, just a twitch of a paw, his knees buckled in relief. "Good boy," he breathed. "That's it, that's what I needed." He worked fast, loading Ghost into the sled like precious cargo, tucked every edge of the coat, every torn scrap of insulation around him. The dog didn't resist, just blinked, slow and trustful, like he understood. And maybe he did. Colt yanked the sled onto the trail. The forest fought him. Every branch slapped, every dip dragged the sled sideways. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. He kept talking as he walked, muttering stories, memories, names. One kept rising. "Buddy." At first just something to say, then something more. It stuck. It meant something. And then just before they broke through the last stretch of trees, Colt felt it, that crawling sensation down the spine. The kind that whispers, "You're not alone." He turned. Far off in the trees, a figure stood still. A man. No motion, no expression. Just watching. Colt's fingers brushed the rifle at his back. His chest tightened. Not with fear, but recognition. Whoever that was hadn't gotten lost. He was planted. Waiting. Colt didn't blink, didn't wave, just turned back and pulled the sled harder. The forest behind them went quiet. Unnaturally quiet. When Colt turned back again, the figure was gone, but the feeling stayed. By the time they reached the truck, Ghost had gone limp again, breathing but unresponsive. Colt didn't waste a second. He loaded him into the back seat, slammed the door, and turned the ignition. The engine coughed, then roared to life. He gripped the wheel with white-knuckled hands and drove. Didn't look back, didn't speak, but his eyes scanned every turn, every bend in the road, like he expected company. Just before hitting the main, rode into Missoula. Something caught in the corner of his eye. A black pickup truck parked at the edge of the woods. No plates, no lights, just sitting there, watching the trail. Colt's heart jolted. He didn't stop, didn't slow down, just stared straight ahead and drove. Every nerve on high alert. Whoever was out there wasn't finished, and Colt knew it. He pulled into the emergency vet clinic past Reserve Street like a man possessed. Storm still howling, heart still racing. The building looked ordinary, like 1,000 other places he'd passed and ignored. Funny how lifelines look like nothing, until they're all you've got. He didn't wait for help. He didn't ask for permission. Colt burst through the front doors with Ghost in his arms, dripping snow and blood and breathless panic. The receptionist froze. Then chaos. 2 vet techs appeared from the back, led by a woman in scrubs. Older, sharp-eyed, steady. "Dr. Elise Monroe, what happened?" she asked, already gloving up. "Found him in a cave," Colt rasped. Chained, bleeding, freezing. That was all she needed. The clinic moved like a machine. IVs, monitors, fluids. Colt stood like a statue against the wall, watching them work. Soaked to the bone, jaw clenched against everything that was coming up inside. Ghost. He looked so small on that table, so fragile. But he was still fighting. Dr. Monroe finally turned to him. "He's not out of the woods, but you brought him in time." Colt exhaled, maybe for the first time all day. He sat down and didn't move. Outside, the storm rattled the windows. Inside, time paused, and in the space between breath and silence, Colt realized something terrifying and true. This wasn't over. The clinic was still, save for the soft beeping of machines and the hum of a storm pressing against the windows like a memory trying to get back in. Colt didn't sleep. Couldn't. He sat next to Ghost's kennel like a soldier on post, hand resting, lightly on the dog's back beneath a heated blanket. The dog had stabilized, for now, but every rise and fall of his chest felt borrowed. Like life was loaned, not guaranteed. Dr. Monroe had been candid. Infection, old trauma, deliberate injuries. "This wasn't neglect," she said. "This was intentional." Colt hadn't needed her to say it. He'd seen the chain, felt the ice in the cave, heard the silence that only cruelty could engineer. Around midnight, he shifted in his seat and pulled something small from his coat pocket, a broken chain link. Rusted, jagged, cold. It had come loose during his fight to free. Ghost. He rolled it between his fingers like a talisman. A reminder. That's when he heard it. A growl, low, deep, primal. Colt looked up. Ghost was awake, ears twitching, eyes fixed on the window. Colt followed his gaze. A figure, standing across the street under the flickering glow of a dying street lamp. Red jacket pulled up, face hidden, watching. Colt stood, heart hammering, and moved to the glass. When he opened the clinic door, the figure was gone. No footsteps, no sound. Just snow and the distant echo of a truck pulling away. Back inside, Dr. Monroe gave him a look. "Everything okay?" Colt didn't answer. He just returned to his chair, sat closer this time. Ghost's paw twitched beneath the blanket. His eyes stayed on the window until sleep reclaimed him. A few hours later, Monroe re-entered the room with something in her hand. A manila envelope. "No name, no return address," she said, placing it in his lap. "Slid under the door while you were outside." One word was written on the front in block letters. "Stop." Inside, a photo. Colt froze. It was the cave. The same rocks, same frozen floor, but Ghost wasn't alone. Two more dogs, both chained, both slumped, both gone. The snow in the picture matched. What Colt remembered, fresh, layered the same. This wasn't old, this was recent. Someone had taken that photo, someone had watched. Colt's blood went cold. This wasn't an isolated act of cruelty. It was a pattern, a ritual, and he'd just interrupted it. He stared at the image long after Monroe had left the room. Ghost was more than a victim. He was a witness, and someone out there wasn't finished. "Dawn," Colt had made up his mind. "I need a few hours," he told Monroe. "If anything happens, call me." She didn't ask questions, just handed him a thermos. "Be careful." He took only what he needed: rifle, flashlight, notebook, and fury. He didn't go back to the trailhead. He knew he was being watched. Instead, he took an old service road, one mostly forgotten by snowplows and hikers. The deeper into the mountains he went, the quieter the world became. Trees stood like silent sentinels. The snow muffled everything except his breath and boots. By noon, he reached the cave again. It looked smaller now, less monstrous. Or maybe Colt was different. He entered slowly, carefully, tracing his own steps, and then he saw it, half buried under ice near the wall, something stiff, frozen, a tarp. He pulled it free. Beneath it, a duffel bag, heavy, frozen shut. It took 5 minutes of prying before the zipper gave way. Inside, syringes used, dirty. A blood-stained collar, not Ghost's. Plastic tags, no names, just numbers. And at the bottom, a notebook, leather-bound, molded stiff at the edges. Inside, pages of cold, precise handwriting. Codes, dates, short phrases. Trial 6 failed. Replaced with new candidate. Chain reinforced. Location reset. Colt's stomach twisted. This wasn't just abuse. This was experimentation. Every page was darker than the last. Observations on starvation, isolation, pain tolerance. Ghost hadn't just been thrown away, he'd been tested. He was the only one who made it out. Colt's hands trembled as he flipped through the final pages. Then, one. More detail. On the cave wall near where Ghost had been chained, scratches. At first he thought they were random, animal panic. But then he looked closer. Patterns, claw marks, deliberate, repeated, etched over and over in the same shape. One word, help. Carved so many times it must have torn the pads of Ghost's paws. He hadn't just waited. He'd tried to speak. Colt leaned his head against the wall, eyes closed, the weight of it all pressing in. This place wasn't just cold. It was designed to be a silent prison, a graveyard, and someone had built it. Just before he turned to leave, something else caught his eye. Near the entrance, resting on a flat stone shelf, a single bullet casing, clean. Recent, not dropped, placed, a message. Colt stepped into the light, notebook clenched in one fist. This wasn't just about saving a dog anymore. Ghost didn't need a home. He needed justice. The sky over Missoula had cleared, but the air held a sharp edge, like something waiting to break. Back at the clinic, Colt sat with the notebook open in front of him, pages weighed down by a coffee mug and a half-loaded rifle. Ghost was asleep, in his kennel, chest rising steadily, paws twitching now and then as if still wandering through frozen memories. The room felt too quiet. Dr. Monroe returned from a call and shut the door behind her. She looked at Colt the way doctors look at families, on the edge of bad news. No sugar, just gravity. You need to see this, she said, setting down a printed map on the counter. She circled an area northeast of the cave. 3 hikers went missing in this sector last winter. 2 dogs with them. The dogs were never found. One hiker, survivor, claimed they heard howling from a cave just before a storm hit. But the rescue team blamed the weather. Colt stared at the map. And nobody followed up? Monroe shook her head. Not after they found the guy incoherent and frostbitten. They wrote it off. But the cave's not on any public map, Colt muttered. Exactly, she said. They both knew what that meant. Whoever had been using that cave wasn't hiding from accident. They were hiding on purpose. The envelope, the man in the red parka, the sled, the photo, the chain link. It was all part of something woven tight. And now that Colt had pulled one thread, the rest was starting to fray. He stood up, pacing. Ghost didn't just survive, he said. He escaped something they thought was foolproof. Or someone let him escape, Monroe added quietly. Colt froze. She met his eyes. To see what you'd do. The thought hit like a slap. What if this was a test? Not of the dog, of him. Colt walked out into the parking lot to clear his head, and stopped cold. His truck was still where he'd left it, but not untouched. 2 tires, slashed. Not slow leaks. Deep, clean cuts. Precision, intent, and written across. The windshield in the frost in neat block letters. Stay down, not stay away. Stay down. A threat. A command. A taunt. Colt backed up slowly, eyes scanning the surrounding buildings. Nobody visible. No sound but the faint hum of distant traffic. He re-entered the clinic without a word, grabbed his rifle, and returned to Monroe. I'm staying here, he said simply. You should go. She didn't blink. I'm not going anywhere. The clinic locked its doors. Lights dimmed. Colt moved a cot into the lobby again, boots still on, rifle leaned nearby. That night, Ghost stirred. A soft bark in his sleep. A twitch, a growl. Then stillness, until it happened again. Colt sat up, alert. Outside, movement. He approached the window slowly. There he was, the red jacket, same man, same pose. Same stare, still watching. Colt didn't open the door this time. He just stood behind the glass and stared back. The man didn't flinch, didn't wave, just turned, slowly, and walked into the dark. 15 minutes later, Monroe found another envelope at the back door. No name, no stamp, just one word again, enough. Inside, a single photograph, a close-up, ghost in the cave. From above, from an angle Colt never saw. The image was recent. Taken within minutes, hours of Colt's arrival at the cave. It wasn't just surveillance, it was control. Someone had been watching the whole time. Someone wanted Colt to know they'd been watching, and now they were tightening the noose. That night, Colt couldn't sleep. Instead, he sat beside Ghost with the notebook open again, studying every scribble. He noticed something new, initials tucked into the corner of one page. RTK below it, an address. A Montana P.O. box. He snapped a photo, then flipped to the back. Hand-drawn map, rough but familiar, not just the cave, others. 7 marked with X's, 1 labeled retired, structure collapsed. 6 still circled, 6 unknown caves, 6 possible victims. Colt looked at Ghost. "You're not the only one," he whispered. Ghost blinked, lifted his head. And for the first time, Colt saw a flicker not of fear, but readiness. Like the dog knew, this wasn't over. Morning broke with an eerie stillness. The snow had stopped, but the silence it left behind was heavier than before, thick with everything unsaid. Inside the clinic, Ghost was curled up in the corner of his kennel, half asleep, half listening. His breathing had steadied. His wounds were cleaned and wrapped. He wasn't healed, not yet, but he was no longer dying. Colt sat beside him, fingers resting lightly on the edge of the blanket. He hadn't left that spot all night. They were both. Changed now, the man who had walked into the woods to chase elk was gone. In his place stood someone different, someone who had found more than an injured dog in that cave. He had found purpose. He had found a reason to fight. And the dog, this broken, battered soul with scars etched deeper than fur, had come back from the edge not just because of warmth or medicine, but because for the first time in a long time, someone stayed. Someone didn't turn away. The vet techs had started calling him Ghost because of how quiet he moved, how hollow his eyes had once looked. The name stuck, but to Colt it was more than a name. It was a reminder of where he came from, of what he survived, and of the others who didn't. By noon, Ghost was eating again, clumsily, chicken broth dripping from his muzzle as he licked too. Quickly, too eagerly, like he wasn't used to food being offered without condition. His eyes followed Colt now. Not with fear, not with hope, with belief. Colt ran his hand gently down the side of the kennel. Ghost leaned into the touch, just slightly, just enough. Outside, the world carried on. People shoveled sidewalks, warmed cars, scrolled phones, unaware of the war that had played out in the storm. Unaware that right there, inside that small emergency clinic on the edge of town, something rare had taken root. A bond, not forged by training or ownership, but by shared silence, shared survival. Colt leaned back in the chair, eyes never leaving. "Ghost, we're not done," he murmured. "Not even close." Ghost let out a breath, soft, steady, and for the first time it didn't sound like pain. It sounded like peace.